Why'd you lie so much?
If I knew the answer to that, Jeremy, I wouldn't be here.
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're looking at the most spine-chilling and unsettling interviews across British daytime programmes.
But then you found out that he'd actually tried to kill you before the parachute jump.
Yes.
Before we begin, we publish new content every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.
Number 20. The Human Puppy, This Morning.
Help yourself.
Oh.
Oh, you can't.
Oh, you can't. Oh, you need to be fed.
There's one in the bowl.
This bloke, Tom Peters, was asked onto This Morning after appearing on a Channel 4 documentary about the phenomenon of human puppies. He now spends his free time role-playing as a Dalmatian in this latex suit, complete with its elaborate mask, a hobby he says cost him his relationship with his ex-fiancée Rachel, who, despite no longer being in a relationship with him, still helps him get in and out of his costume.
Is it a sexual thing?
No, it's not sexual. The whole point behind puppy play is it's escapism.
He insists that there's nothing sexual about his latex dog suit, but why she still does all this, even though they broke up 8 years before, is anyone's guess.
But
we're best friends.
You're best mates.
We're closer being separate than we were when
but
we
you
were
won't
together.
go out walking with him and all that sort of stuff. You don't do any of that.
No.
So
Number 19. Katie Piper, Loose Women.
It's funny because when I look back on it and reflect, it does feel like two separate lives. And you know,
There's significantly more awareness about acid attacks today, and that's, in no small part, thanks to the efforts of TV personality Katie Piper. She'd already been working as a model, but in 2008 she was horrifically attacked multiple times by an ex-boyfriend who threw acid over her.
it was like regressing and learning to swallow, difficulties of breathing, like all your independence and dignity as well, sort of taken away. I mean,
Piper waived her right to anonymity to raise awareness for the long and extremely difficult recovery faced by victims of these attacks, including the extensive plastic surgery she had to reconstruct her face.
how people reacted was my motivation to do the documentary that we saw that clip from, because initially I looked very different to how I sit here today. You know, I wore a plastic face mask for 2 years.
The disturbing part of this was her recounting the attack, an unimaginable horror that most of us, thankfully, will never have to go through. And for those who do, Piper's work will certainly help them.
I just thought, this is my life and who is anyone to take it away from me? I'm just going to get on with it the best I can.
Number 18. The Wrong Surgery, This Morning.
So, inner leg to take the loose skin off and then back lift as well.
We've all heard of people going abroad to get plastic surgery, but what if you do that and come back having had a life-changing procedure you didn't even consent to? That's what happened to Michelle Heath, who went to Turkey for an operation to remove excess skin after weight loss, having been convinced by the low prices.
So at this point, I didn't know that they had done the BBL on me.
You didn't know any...
But then she woke up having been given a Brazilian bum lift without consent, the most dangerous cosmetic procedure someone can have.
You
I
woke
didn't find
up...
out that that happened to me until the third day. I didn't know why I couldn't sit down.
Along with that, the skin surgery didn't go well either, with the wounds getting infected and leaving enormous scars. It was absolutely chilling and a warning to anyone considering cheap plastic surgery overseas.
My compression suit was dirty, very dirty, and they wanted me in a hotel room to wash that out and just put it back on.
Number 17. Samantha Bryan, Loose Women.
I understand completely that your mum wanted to protect you from that information.
Yeah.
But tell us about, you were researching murder cases, weren't you? And
In 2017, unknown woman Samantha Bryan waived her right to anonymity to talk about when she learned the chilling identity of her biological father. It turned out that she was the daughter of Soho murderer Ian Huntley. Huntley murdered 2 young girls in 2002, getting sentenced to life in prison.
This is the story. This is the picture here.
Yeah,
You
it
saw.
is, yeah.
Bryan appeared on Loose Women along with her family to express her horror at the initial discovery made when she found a photograph of her mother and Huntley. Her mother was 15 when she fell pregnant, a decade younger than Huntley, making her another of his victims. More recently, as news came that Huntley's life support was to be turned off following the attack in prison, Bryan reportedly felt relief, saying his ashes should be flushed down the toilet.
You know, just get my point across, you know, show people I'm nothing like him, I never will be, and just to move forward from it. But
Number 16. Philomena Willits. This morning.
And what was he like?
I didn't really know him. He was just a boy that came up to me on the very first day. I didn't know anybody. Obviously, you don't when you go to university. And he just said, "Hi, my name's David."
In 2017, this otherwise ordinary woman appeared on This Morning to talk about her stalking hell at the hands of an ex-boyfriend, David Brett. The two had a brief relationship at university in the 1990s, and a lifelong obsession began on David's part.
He was fine while it was just me and him. As soon as anyone said, "Would you like to go, out at the weekend to a party?" and David would be like, "Well, either I'm coming or you're not going by yourself."
Willits says all of her boyfriends had been attacked by Brett, while her husband was slandered by him, who would contact friends, family and employers accusing him of being a sex offender.
He then found out email addresses for all of the people that your husband worked with.
He made it his business to find out everything about my husband, where he worked, all his work colleagues.
On This Morning, she talked about how she lived in fear of her life, with Brett at the time slated to be released in only a few months. Philomena, meanwhile, was having to live in hiding to try and stop him from finding her again.
I'm devastated. I think the whole system's a joke. I've been completely let down. There's just nothing that the police can do now. It'll just continue.
Number 15. Tommy Rattigan, Loose Women.
And for me, that's what makes it even more sinister, is that children trust a woman. When they see a woman, they trust that woman's going to be kind to them.
Together, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley were convicted of 3 counts of murder, though it's believed they committed at least 5, and perhaps more. One person who thankfully escaped an encounter with the Moors murderers with his life intact, however, was Tommy Rattigan, who was only aged 7 when he met Hindley. Hindley invited him to Brady's grandmother's house on the promise of a jam sandwich, with Rattigan begging for food in a local park at the time.
Brady was in the kitchen all the time.
Right.
He.
And were they talking? Was she going out of the room and coming back in? Were they talking?
I think she went out about 3 times.
And could you?
He said that it didn't take long for him to realise that he was in danger, and he managed to escape while Brady and Hindley argued in the kitchen. He said that even decades on, he remembered the smell of Hindley's hairspray.
And did they try and go after you?
She did. I actually managed to get out of the window, and I felt her. She grabbed the back of my foot.
Number 14. Sex for rent landlord. This morning.
I've had 3 long-term arrangements.
Tenants?
Yeah, arrangements. They're not tenants. They don't. I mean, if it's a tenant, you're paying rent.
This wrong'un turned up on This Morning to explain that, while what he was doing was illegal, he didn't think there was anything morally wrong with it. He posed his novel living arrangement as a solution to the struggles of modern dating, including at one point accusing women of having an agenda when they enter into relationships.
If then they have benefits, them having sex with you, does it bother you that they're doing it for that reason rather than from the enjoyment of having sex and a fun sexual relationship?
He had only the back of his head filmed, with Holly Willoughby looking on in horror as he talked about how he was offering a life that could be a stepping stone to greater things.
Does it bother you that you are breaking the law?
I'm not breaking the law.
Well,
but you have to ask, if it's so positive and not really a sex for rent agreement, as he says, why does he insist on being anonymous?
I'm doing nothing wrong. I'm doing nothing wrong. It's
but
an
you
arrangement
are.
between 2. No, I'm not. It's an arrangement between 2 adult human beings.
Number 13. Vigilante Justice. Good Morning Britain.
If we have an admission on video, so on the videos, if we have an admission from that person, there's 100% proof. Surely that has to be taken into account.
Coercive admission, an admission when you are intimidated.
This man, who calls himself an online child enforcer, arrived on GMB to argue with a police officer about his vigilantism, with groups accused of perverting the course of justice by posting their evidence publicly instead of going to the police. He insists that only a handful of times have they falsely accused someone of being a predator, and that instead of the vigilante groups having to provide the police with evidence, the police should in fact be coming to them and asking for it.
You never allowed due process to go through before you published the video.
I phoned the police after that happened. The response I got was it's an occupational hazard.
Experts insist that while the law has problems, these vigilantes should still be turning over their evidence to the police, with one of the accused even taking his own life after appearing in an internet video.
My concern about this is you interfering with the court process and the legal process once these guys are apprehended by posting videos online.
Number 12. Reverend Jason Bray. This morning.
And as I said the Lord's Prayer, I felt my sort of back strangely arched backwards. So it was like sort of somebody was twisting me.
If you don't like ghost stories, look away. Britain's foremost ghostbuster, Reverend Jason Bray, has turned up on This Morning multiple times, including in this interview about his real-life exorcisms. He calls himself a deliverance minister and is often called in to help purge people and places from the influence of malevolent spirits.
Writing the book, all of the, a lot of the details have been changed so that maybe people can recognise themselves, but nobody else can recognise them.
He even brings out a bag of tricks, including holy water and a golden chalice, before getting into his supernatural stories. He discusses a time he was brought in by divine providence to bless an ill child who seemed to be being tormented in some way. Perhaps the most disturbing thing, though, was that he did all this to sell copies of his book.
Does it always work?
No, it doesn't always work. Sometimes you can get situations where, it's not that at all.
Number 11. Katie Morgan Davies. This Morning.
In fact, your father was Aravindan Balakrishnan, who was the man running the cult, who you saw every day, but he never admitted he was your father.
No.
This disturbing commune operated in Lambeth for decades, until eventually police were tipped off that numerous women were being held captive and significantly mistreated. Morgan Davies was the daughter of the cult's leader, who was sentenced to over 20 years in prison, but died in 2022. 6 years into his term.
She used to spy on everything that I did and encourage the other women to spy on me and then to report to him.
Morgan Davies bravely appeared on Good Morning Britain to recount her experiences, including her numerous escapes. Harrowingly, after she escaped on a bank holiday, the police station was short-staffed enough that the abuse wasn't identified and she was sent back to the commune. For the first 30 years of her life, she was controlled by the cult, unable to even go to the dentist.
But 30 years inside, 5 years out, how have you managed to rebuild your life?
It's been a long process.
Number 10. Alex Skeel. This Morning.
She isolated you very cleverly from your family and your friends. She took your phone away from you, closed down your Facebook page, opened up another Facebook page, and that was the one that she was in control of.
Much of the conversation around domestic violence centres on women, who are by and large the victims. But they aren't the only victims. And this man, Alex Skeel, waived his right to anonymity to talk about men suffering violence at the hands of their female partners.
Well, it started off, I was lying in the bed and she would wait till I was asleep and just hit me on the head with a bottle. I managed to get rid of the bottle without her knowing. And then she moved on to a hammer. She started hitting me with hammers.
He discusses a disturbing incident where his girlfriend, Jordan, lied to him about his grandfather's death and kept him socially separated from his family.
There was nothing I could do. I had no way of contacting anyone, and if I did do it, I would have... She told me if I ever tried to leave, she'd kill me.
She then physically hurt him with any implement that she could find and degraded him psychologically, leaving him living in fear with no way to reach the outside world. Eventually, neighbours called the police and Alex admitted to what was going on.
How do you feel about her now?
I don't need to waste my energy thinking about her.
Right.
There's no need for that.
Number 9. John Traynor. This Morning.
We lived rough for about a year in a tent. Railway stations, train stations, bus stations, things like that, just to sleep.
On This Morning, John Traynor opened up about his ex-girlfriend Joanna Dennehy's mistreatment of him and their children, along with her alcohol misuse, and of course, her multiple murders. He was another person who had a close brush with a serial killer, as Joanna murdered 3 men in 2013 and attempted to murder at least 2 more. The crimes became known as the Peterborough Ditch Murders.
She almost scalded my second daughter, the youngest one, in the bath, lifting her into the bath, and I'd got in there to grab just before it happened.
Traynor and Dennehy had had 2 children together, and he eventually managed to leave her after she pulled a knife on him. Dennehy pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison. There's very little chance of her ever being released.
I think you've done an incredible job protecting your family.
I don't think I've protected them because I've got my face splashed all over TV, but I think that's what everybody wants, isn't it? They want my story. They want to know if I'm normal or not, or I'm this.
Number 8. Stacey Gwilliam. Good Morning Britain.
When you were buried alive in the wake of this attack, were you left unconscious? So you came to sort of underneath dirt and debris.
This woman appeared on Good Morning Britain to talk about her horrific attack and near-death experience when it seemed that her ex-fiance had actually thought he'd killed her and buried her outside Swansea in a shallow grave.
What made you stay with somebody like this?
It was just hoping he would change, believing that he would change.
Being buried alive is most people's worst nightmare, and she actually went through it. Luckily, the shallowness of the grave meant that she was able to escape and eventually get to safety, gaining medical attention for her injuries.
So I said to him, I'm not going in the property. He tried taking the keys out of my ignition, fighting in the car me to get me out the car, and I said, I ain't going in the property with you.
The attack came after she finally decided to leave her fiancé for good. He was eventually caught and sent to prison, but only for 8 years.
He got life imprisonment, but he can apply for parole in 8.5 years.
So he could be out in 8 years. How do you feel about the prospect of this guy walking the streets again?
Frightened.
Number 7. Vanessa Frake, This Morning.
And when you are at the coalface and you're aware of these high-profile criminals like Rose West and Myra Hindley, are they treated any differently? I don't know.
Stories from inside the prison system can often be distressing, and this guest on This Morning, a former governor at HMP Holloway, which was the most infamous women's prison in the UK until its closure, had many of them. In her tenure at various prisons, she encountered infamous serial killers Myra Hindley and Rose West, and even shared that Hindley once made her a cup of tea.
I mean, I'm not sure I would have drank that tea. Did you drink it?
Of course I did. I was thirsty.
Alison Hammond was horrified to hear that Frake had accepted the cup of tea from Hindley when a great many people wouldn't have. Frake also suggested that Hindley had been given tea duties because the prison wanted to almost show her off as one of the country's most notorious inmates.
That hurt more than actually the chunk she bit out of my shoulder.
Sure. Oh my goodness.
Number 6. Kathy Richards, This Morning.
The Wests were, dare I say it, a nice couple.
Well, this is the thing. Like, what was your first impressions of them? You know,
They
you
were
didn't know them. They're just lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely
they were
couple.
helpful.
So you move
nice.
in.
We just heard about someone who met Rose West during her time in prison, but Kathy Richards, along with her sister, went through the ordeal of being a lodger at the West's infamous House of Horrors in Gloucestershire for 18 months.
In the bedroom when we went in, there was like drilled holes, call them, on the wall between.
Like peepholes.
Yeah.
The Wests killed at least 10 women, with their house full of human remains, and Kathy very nearly could have been the 11th. Chillingly, Kathy's fellow lodger at the time was Shirley Robinson, who became one of the Wests' victims, aged only 17.
What was she like? What was her reaction like when they were reading out everything that they'd done?
She was just stood there, no emotion, no nothing, just stood there.
She too suffered at Fred West's hands, and then Shirley disappeared. She eventually moved out, but didn't know what had been going on, until the Wests were arrested much later.
Why was she? What was she like? What was her reaction like when they were reading out everything that they'd done?
She was just stood there, no emotion, no nothing, just stood there.
Number 5, Vicky Cilliers, Loose Women.
So the main parachute didn't.
It was, yeah,
open.
It wasn't viable. It did open, but it wasn't controllable.
Right.
So I had to get rid of it and deploy the reserve. But
another story of domestic violence. Everybody thought that Victoria and her husband Emile were adrenaline junkies, enjoying recreational skydives. This was true, but one day in 2015, Emile attempted to murder Vicky by tampering with her parachute during a jump. She very nearly died, but miraculously survived the fall, while her husband was investigated for attempted murder.
But they didn't open, neither of those parachutes opened.
No.
And remarkably, you hit the ground, Vicky, which when people were watching this on the ground, they actually arrived to you with a body bag.
She appeared on Loose Women nearly a decade on to talk about the ordeal, which wasn't even the first time Emile had tried to take her life. Considering Cilliers was a highly qualified parachute instructor with over 2,000 jumps to her name, the failure of 2 parachutes in one jump was certainly suspicious. Emile was sentenced to life in prison.
what the police were telling me was correct, and he'd tried twice to kill me. If I stand up in court and speak out against him, I had no idea.
Number 4, the Hampstead Hoax, This Morning.
After I received the email from the school, I phoned the school, I spoke to the headmistress, and she said, I've been advised to tell you to contact the police.
This shocking story unfolded throughout 2014. with nearly 200 parents and community figures being accused of serious crimes against children. It became known as the Hampstead Hoax, all traced back to only 2 children who conspired to make false allegations to police. The allegations were widely reported, and dozens of people involved were harassed and subjected to violence because of the children claiming they were part of a satanic baby-murdering cult.
And I sat her down in the kitchen with my husband and said that one of her school friends had made some allegations, and she burst into tears and said, "Why is she saying these things about me?" And I...
Investigations eventually determined that the children had been manipulated into making the allegations by their mother, but the damage had been done. One of the falsely accused victims appeared anonymously on This Morning to talk about what had happened.
After a number of years, there were some unsuccessful prosecutions that collapsed, and other parents had been involved originally, but then felt that they'd lost confidence in the police.
Number 3, Sylvia Edwards, Good Morning Britain.
On air, you know you're on air. You're with a very high-profile, popular presenter. He's literally got his hand where it shouldn't be and is assaulting you.
While still a teenager, Sylvia Edwards, like many young people, appeared in the audience of Top of the Pops. But this was an episode hosted by prolific sex criminal Jimmy Savile. He groped her on live TV in an assault that Edwards says has haunted her ever since. She eventually appeared on Good Morning Britain in 2016, while investigations were still ongoing into just how widespread Savile's offences were.
You say you told a member of staff at the time that your complaint was dismissed.
Yeah, well, that's what I went and told my father, but that was all. But I did tell, I just presumed that they would say something, but he didn't. He just told me to get lost.
She even says that she tried to report the assault at the time and was ignored. She was one of many victims who came out to lambast the BBC's cover-up culture that allowed him to get away with it for so long, even on camera.
I think they all need to be named and shamed if they're still there, but the fact is they can't just keep covering up high-profile people that do things like this.
Number 2, Stalker in the Loft, This Morning.
And they say it in horror films, but until you actually see it, the glazed look across the eyes, and you can't reason. No matter what you do, you can't get him out of that.
In this nightmarish stalking story, a woman, Hayley, realised that she was being stalked by a man living in her loft. He'd gained access to the property because he was her ex-boyfriend, whom she dumped after finding out he'd been cheating on her. But he then made her life a living hell from the confines of her own attic.
No clue he was in the house and he was in the loft.
That's right, yeah. So I'm still unsure as to what points he got in and out. I mean, we did find, buckets of urine and things up in the loft space.
He was hiding in the house with her children and eventually fled when police turned up, temporarily hiding in a caravan in the garden and then going on the run for over a week. Hayley had no idea how long he'd been in the loft for, but he'd worked out how to lock the hatch from the inside, going undiscovered potentially for weeks.
He was eventually found. He pleaded guilty to stalking and was handed a 20-week suspended sentence. You were also granted a restraining order banning him from contacting you for 3 years.
Number 1, Steve Dymond, The Jeremy Kyle Show.
Can I just say about this guy, he was on some medication, I believe. It doesn't matter what medication. So keen was he to come and do this lie detector. He went to his doctors and he found out about whether that was okay to do a lie detector.
This interview, if it can be called an interview and not a confrontation, was never broadcast on television and only released years afterwards during the inquest into The Jeremy Kyle Show. Steve Dymond was one of the programme's last ever participants and took his own life after being accused of cheating by Kyle when he failed a lie detector test.
I just lied to her for no reason.
Still to this day?
No. Since we split up and got back together, I've never lied once to her.
Most people now know that lie detectors are extremely unreliable, and it was even more disturbing than we could have imagined to see how Dymond believed the lie detector was going to prove his faithfulness. Following his death a week later, the show was finally cancelled after 15 years of tormenting people for entertainment.
She said to me, he didn't need to lie, did you?
Yeah, he didn't need to lie.
I didn't
need to lie at all.
Not at all.
Let us know in the comments what extra security measures you're going to install after hearing these stories.